Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to another episode of the Indigo Womb Wisdom podcast. I'm your host and sister friend, Shatia Owsley, and thank you for watching and or listening. So sit back, grab some tea and a notebook, and let's vibe together as we have organic and practical conversations embracing intuitive womb wisdom, spirituality, and a sprinkle of magic to rebel, restore, and radiate overall wellness in our lives.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Indigo Womb Wisdom podcast. I am your host and your sister friend, Shatia Owsley. And today I would like to introduce our guest, Antoinette Majors. Antoinette is a biomedical engineer turned certified full spectrum doula and prenatal mindset coach, blending 15 years of healthcare technology expertise with a deep commitment to transforming the way women experience birth. As the founder of Mama Mindframe, she guides expecting mamas to connect with their innate power and intuition so that they can lead their births with calm, confidence, and clarity without being swayed by fear or unnecessary interventions. Her core message is normal versus natural, challenges the common acceptance of routine practices in birth. For Antoinette, normal is a statistic and natural is an intention. She empowers women to discern the difference, reclaiming birth as a deeply personal and physiological process rather than a standardized event. Her unique approach is rooted in both science and spirit, weaving evidence-based education with mindfulness, emotional regulation, and self-advocacy practices. Antoinette's mission is to improve birth outcomes by helping women reclaim their role as leaders in the birth space, positioning them not as passive patients, but as active decision makers supported by their care team. Antoinette, I'm so glad that you are here today. You guys, I met Antoinette 10 years ago at a postpartum doula training in Oklahoma. And our children were around the same age at the time. And our lives have just evolved over the years. And so I am so excited that you are here today. I'm so excited for you to share your story, your journey of how you got here. And there's so many gems. So I know I did your bio and you do all the things, but I would love for you to just give your own introduction about yourself and talk a little bit about how you started your journey from biomedical engineering all the way now to being a full spectrum doula.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm super excited about this. Yeah, so as you mentioned, I've been a biomedical engineer for about 15 years or so now. And started my birthwork training about, I think that very first train, that was my very first doula training, the one that I met you. So about 10 years ago, and continue to do trainings and keep those skills current. But most recently, just being in the birth workspace and interacting with moms and reading stories on social media and hearing mom after mom talk about their birth story, but not with joy, with regret or with shame, or like, I wish I wouldn't have said yes to this thing, or I wish I would have stood my ground on this particular choice. And so that really helped me to kind of shift my focus and think about the way that I was providing care and support to the moms and just the birth workspace in general. So your traditional typical doula package oftentimes, and I'll speak for myself, but oftentimes it includes maybe like 3 prenatal visits, birth support, and then maybe 2 to 3 postpartum follow-up visits, right? And a lot of times we're spending that time working on physical pain management techniques, maybe talking through postpartum support, things of that nature. but not so much focusing on making sure that mom's mindset is in a place that she's able to actually complement those physical pain management techniques that we're teaching and enforcing, or not enforcing, but that we're teaching and modeling for
Mhm.
mom and for the partner. And so in noticing kind of that gap, decided that I wanted to kind of to step in and stand in that gap and provide a touch point for moms that's more than just those few prenatal visits. That
Mhm.
is if they need a weekly touch point to check in and talk about where they are mentally, get some tools to make sure that, you know, once we discuss this birth plan, they actually have the confidence to advocate for themselves once they get into the provider space.
Mhm.
And so I started shifting my practice more towards focusing on that mindset piece so that I could help mamas feel better equipped to really stand their ground. Because even when we show up in the birth space as doulas, right? We're not
Mhm.
the decision makers. The
Mhm.
decision is still the mama or even the partner if she deflects that decision point to the partner, but it's not us. All we can do is stand in that gap of support. And so, what have heard, even from just other birth workers sharing their stories, is they spend all this time with this mom. They have this birth plan. They've gone over it all these times. They've prepped mom and partner for, hey, this is what you do for this type of pain, the positioning for helping to move and progress labor, all of these things. And they get to the hospital and it's like a whole new person. It's like
Mhm.
the whole birth plan just is out the window. And they're like, what? And, you know, it's our place. We're there to support the mom, right? But it's also, spoken to birth workers. It can be really traumatizing for the birth worker too, when they experience that, because now you're kind of feeling like, okay, like I want to support mom in what she wants, but now I'm super confused as to what that actually is. Like, is this just coercion that I'm seeing? And like, do I need to remind her, like, hey, remember what we talked about?
Mhm.
Remember
Mhm.
your birth plan and these things that you said you wanted me to hold you to? Like, is that still what we're doing?
Mhm.
Or like, is this really what you want to do? Do you really want to do this other thing? And so, just wanting to both and not only provide and bridge that gap for moms, but also like reminding other birth workers too, like, hey, like these are some of the things that you may want to touch on. And then I'm happy to join your team, and not as a doula trying to replace you or take your place, but to provide that additional support. Because
Mhm.
let's be real, one of the things in the birth work world is that a lot of us are still trying to figure out is how do we do this in a sustainable way, right? Financially sustainable, mentally sustainable, physically sustainable.
Mhm.
So it's only so many patients, so many clients that we can take from month to month. And we each only have so much bandwidth. So for someone to be the more traditional doula and trying to provide that weekly mindset touch point, that to me, that doesn't sound sustainable. So I always tell people, I see myself as just another part of the birth support team. So I'm there to make sure that the things that you're working on with mama, with partner, that those things are actually able to stick to the best of the ability, because we know birth is birth, right? We don't always control the outcomes. But for us to have that grounding and that presence and that foundation for things to go as much the way that mama has determined she wants them to go as possible.
Mhm. Yeah, very true. And I think this is very important. And I am excited about your pivot from, you know, just really focusing on, as you mentioned, the traditional aspects of being a doula and really shifting to more of focusing on the mind and the spirit. And that's not to say that other doulas are not doing that. But when you are specifically, that is really your main focus, we are specifically working on shifting your mindset and shifting how you feel within your body based off of the thoughts that are coming up for you,
Yeah.
that is imperative for positive progress, I would have to say,
Mm-hmm.
and to be open when challenges do arise, because we know that they will arise. And so when we are able to work on the mind and those thoughts that
Yes.
come up, it is
Yeah.
extremely helpful. So, when you are working with a client, what are some of the things that you are spending the majority of your time on with that client, especially a brand new client coming in? What does that look like for them?
So, when I am working with a new client, I always start with having them to reflect on what, like, when they think about birth, like, what visuals do they get in their minds? And then tracing back, where did that come from? Because a lot of us, without realizing it, right, have been programmed by years and years of seeing birth on TV as women on their back, screaming in agony and pain to the top of their lungs. And we've internalized that as the norm for what birth it is. And
Mhm.
so I always start with challenging that norm, or having, like I said, the mom to reflect on, okay, so when you visualize birth in your mind, like, what do you see? What does that look like? What do you hear? How do you feel? Like, what are you feeling in your body, like you mentioned? And let's talk about that. And especially if that is what comes to your mind, like this pain and agony, and unpacking that does not have to be your reality. Yes, that is what they have chosen to depict over and over again, in media and on TV, and again through programming. It's called television programming for a
Mhm.
reason. But that does not have to be your reality. Like, you can choose to have a different experience. And so showing moms, like, hey, like, here is this beautiful birth experience. And also at that point, making a point to remind mama about being mindful of what she's consuming around birth experiences during this time. Because for whatever reason, it's just like in traffic, if it's an accident, like, we gotta look, you know? And a lot of times in preparing for birth, for some reason, like, the most horrendous worst case scenario birth stories are what people seek out, not realizing again that you are consuming these visualizations, you're consuming this energy, this their experience, and internalizing those things in your body, in your mind, and if that is not reflective of the experience that you desire, then we don't need to be worried about that. And not to have what they call toxic positivity or whatever, and to be completely dismissive of the fact that things may not go to plan, but we don't want to reinforce what we don't want to create, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So a lot of the work is really around that, and really unpacking those very initial and internalized experiences around birth. And then after doing that, that typically also leads to some work around advocating for ourselves with those that are close to us, right? Because outside of TV, then that's typically the next place that we receive that kind of internalized energy around what birth is from, our mom, from grandma, auntie, whoever. Everybody wants to share, how I tried to go natural, but I couldn't make it. You're not going to be able to do it, and so providing some tools to say for them to be able to sit down and have those conversations with family and even with partner. Because a lot of times, it's the partner and not always in a malicious way. In their mind, they're being protective of their partner, they're being protective of their child, and they just want to make sure that everybody's safe and they want mama to have the experience that she desires. But oftentimes, sometimes, just like family members and friends can project their fears onto mama, partners do the same. So also unpacking that, talking about what those dynamics look like, going over some scripts and providing tools to be able to have those conversations to say, like, hey, in a very loving way, this is the birth that I desire to have. Like, these are my boundaries. Like, I don't want to hear about, the things that didn't go right in your birth. I don't want to hear about like what you're afraid of, whatever those boundaries look like. And also knowing how to escalate those conversations if necessary, because sometimes, people are receptive and open to hearing and respecting and honoring, right, what we're saying in these boundaries. And sometimes people feel like, well, I'm older than you, or I've had more children than you, or whatever the case may be. They feel like they know better than you and are insistent upon projecting. And so sometimes those conversations have to be escalated to like, look, we just not going to be able to be in the space together. Like, it's either this or that, because and also knowing the importance of honoring your energy and honoring yourself and being able to do that without guilt, because we oftentimes like, well, that's my mom, or that's my, such and such. I don't want to, burn any bridges, or I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But then it's like, well, but what about you and your child and your experience? And then also not just like the surface level, oh, my feelings are hurt, but like also how that translates physiologically, right? Because that turns into stress. Stress causes tension in the body. For positive progression and for labor to progress and for us to get to our common goal of getting baby here safely, the body needs to be open and relaxed. And so just putting all those pieces together and providing like a reason why, like, no, we're not just saying it because like you're pregnant and we're trying to like, use that to trump everybody and just say you're going to do what I say do. Like, no, there is a reason for this, like on multiple levels. So exploring that, and then of course always going through the birth plan, developing the birth plan if they don't have one already. And then if they do have one, I have a birth plan template that I utilize that covers everything from like, how do you want your lighting? Do you like aromatherapy? Like, what kind of snacks do you like? We always make sure to include the partner. Like, how involved do you want your partner to be? And of course, the obvious things like, do you want to be unmedicated, or, like, are you okay if they bring up C-section? Do you want Pitocin? All the things that you typically cover, but also like, do you have any cultural beliefs or practices that you want incorporated into your birthing experience? And what does that look like for you? Do you want delayed cord clamping, for lack of a better term? And of course, there's a whole thing about the language around that, but that's a whole nother topic. Those things, skin to skin, of course, so what interventions are you comfortable with, basically, covering all of those bases, making sure that's covered, and not just making sure that they have the birth plan, but also like making sure that they are confident in being able to communicate that with their provider, and then know how to handle it if they get pushback, and also helping them to walk through or being a sounding board for them to talk through if they do receive pushback, like, should you maybe be looking for another provider? Is it that type of pushback, or is this like something that we can work with, So talking through that, and then a lot of the rest of it, of course, is helping them to identify, like, even in regular life, like, what are your practices around dealing with stress? So, like, when you're stressed out, like, do you know breathing techniques already? You know, do you have, like, what are your go-to things? Like, do you meditate already? Like, so establishing what their baseline is around their spiritual and energetic practices, and coming up with things to meet them where they are, right?
Mhm.
Because I don't want to tell you, like, hey, if you do an hour of yoga every day, but you never done yoga before, that's not real accessible and it's not very probable. And
Mhm.
so it's gonna feel like a compacted non success if we don't meet the goal and, like, they aren't able to utilize any of the tools. So it's very important to me to make sure that we do a thorough job of talking through where they are and establishing a realistic baseline for them so that the tools and the things that I suggest are things that are actually accessible
Mhm.
and realistic for them so that they can actually utilize it. And then we continue to build on that as we prepare to really couple those practices again with that physical piece for birth.
Yeah. You've made so many valid points. I was over here jotting down my notes so I wouldn't forget because that mommy brain, girl, I can't hold it all together.
I
I gotta
get it.
write it down. I will forget really quickly. I have a few questions, so we'll go back, but we'll start where you stopped in a sense of the birth plan. And I just had a question. What has been your experience with assisting families in creating their birth plans and the acceptance from the hospitals that you work in and the acceptance from families?
So it's been a little bit of a mixed bag, of course.
Okay.
You have some families where those older family members have very much evolved because they've had their own health challenges, and have chosen to use more holistic or herbal remedies and gone back to those ancestral
Mhm.
practices in that way. And so we're able to make a connection for them through using their experience, and
Mhm.
so they're typically more open and more understanding. And then you do have those on the other side of that, of course, that got the C-section, that got the epidural and aren't and that are still very disconnected from those practices and from remembering that they very well may have been born at home themselves. And if
Mhm.
not them, probably just one generation before them were born at the house.
Mhm.
And so those are, and so I mentioned those escalation tools. Sometimes, those are the family members where it's like, well, like, this is what I'm doing.
Mhm.
Like, your experience was your experience. Like, this is the experience that I am creating for myself and for my family. And if you can't respect that, then as much as I would love for you to be a part of the experience, then I'm just going to have to ask you to please not be here
Mhm.
and not even really ask because people don't know you're going into labor until you call them. But,
Mhm.
just letting like, you just won't be able to be in the space. Like, if
Mhm.
you can't respect what I'm doing. And, that's a hard conversation to have, especially a lot of times it's with the birthing person's own mother, having
Mhm.
to have that conversation of, like, this is what I'm doing. Like, you can get on board, and of course not in these words, right?
Mhm.
But, like, you can get on board or you just won't be able to be a part of it. And,
Mhm.
very plainly, and in terms of the hospitals, deep, deep breath, lots and lots of sighs. 'Cause, whew, um, yeah, honestly, for a moment, I thought about not doing hospital births. And I was like, but that's where they need me the most,
Mhm.
in those spaces. And every now and then you get some good doctors that are very respectful, very willing to honor the birth plan, very understanding, and even like willing participants, like providing additional input and positioning and making suggestions and recommendations that are helpful in mom meeting her goal, right? And then sometimes you have these, I know better than you because I'm a doctor, for providers and experiences in the hospital. And in those cases, that's when those tools of self advocacy are very, very important because, like I mentioned before, it's been times where like I've wanted to step up and be like, hey, like whatever the final word has to come from mom or partner. And so making sure mom and partner and whoever else may be part of the support team are comfortable and have those self advocacy tools is imperative to having a hospital birth that aligns with the experience that you have envisioned for yourself. And even sometimes having to kind of be like a watch person, right? To make sure that those things are honored. And even though like I can't make a decision, I can say, hold on, like she said this, why are you doing that? And then reiterating to mom, like, okay, you said that you did not want this intervention, correct? And, still putting the ball back in her court to advocate for herself and repeat, like, no, I don't want that. And then also making sure that the partner's on the same page and willing and confident and speaking up and saying like, hey, no, she said no, we said no, that's not what we doing, and standing on it. So it can be very challenging in the hospital spaces for sure, especially with declining interventions and especially like declining postpartum things in terms of like ointments and shots and things like that for baby. So just making sure that parents are prepared. I try to also be up to date on like the actual laws and codes and use of different documents. And equipping both myself and my clients and their support team with the language of knowing that, okay, like that's fine because you can say anything is hospital policy, but this trumps policy. And so this is what mom wants. This is what we do.
Period.
Yeah. you know?
So I want to go back because, as I mentioned before, I think that the work that you're doing is extremely important because we do need to focus on just the mindset of preparing for birth, preparing for conception, because it really starts preconception, right? And then we're continuing that mindset work through the birth, through the pregnancy, and then the birth, and then postpartum, and even beyond, right? We notice and we see a lot on social media and just from people's personal experiences that there is a big uptick in healing and self-healing, shifting your mindset. There are tons of book recommendations on helping individuals shift the way they think and really being able to decipher those thoughts that can be extremely intrusive and that can be extremely overwhelming at times, and being able to separate, is this really me or where are these thoughts really coming from, and really being able to break that down. So one thing that I wanted to go back to that you mentioned is the tools that you use. And here I always like to provide those who watch the podcast with practical gems that they may be able to implement in their life. And even though this specific podcast really today is really centered around birth work, I think that the work that you're doing goes way beyond birth work, right? And this is something, even if you're not pregnant or trying to get pregnant, some of the tools that you use with your birth clients can be used for those who are not looking to have a baby, right? And so can you provide us with, let's say, 2 to 3 practical tools that one can use to just kind of start the journey of tapping in to shifting their mindset?
So some people laugh when I say this because it's so simple, but it is one of my most important. And when I talk about accessible earlier, super accessible. Pause. A lot of times when we get in situations or somebody asks us a question, like we feel like we have to like automatically, without thinking, respond or react. Pausing is such an underrated tool of intentionality
Mm.
because it gives you an opportunity to then respond. Because one of the things I like to point out, like you have reaction and then you have a response, right?
Mm.
So reaction is when you just kind of do an automated answer or an automated action without any intention, like on autopilot. But when you take that pause, you give yourself an opportunity to reset and then to move with intention. And so that's something that I always pull out first because it's simple, and it is very effective. Along with that is breath work. I think a lot of people sometimes feel like these tools have to be like this grand gesture or like this super complicated thing that like you need all these things to do. But a lot of times like you have what you need already to do this work. Your breath is such an important tool. And there are very simple patterns. One of my favorite go tos, because it's super simple, is box breathing. And so it's literally what it sounds like. And you can even envision a box in your head as you're doing it. So you inhale for a certain number of counts, and you can start at 4. So you inhale for 4 counts, hold that for 4 counts, exhale for 4 counts, and then hold for 4 counts. And do that in about, at least I tell you, 6 cycles is what I always tell people. And you'd be surprised at what you can release through your breath and how you can even give your brain an opportunity to reset and reconfigure itself just through your breath. And so those are my 2 like go-to baseline. And then if I had to give a third, just super simple, accessible tool, always stretching. Like we don't stretch enough. And I talked about earlier how that stress turns into tension in the body and that tension turns into tightness. And when we're not stretching and we're not breathing, all of that is sitting in your body. And you're wondering like why your jaws are all clenched, your shoulders are up here, because you're not breathing and you're not stretching to get that tightness out of your body. Even if you just wake up and just shake your arms out, like it really is so simple. It doesn't have to be like, you don't have to go to the gym every day. You don't have to do an hour of yoga every day. Like, don't get me wrong, those things are awesome. Like, if you have the capacity to go to the gym regularly or to do yoga regularly, absolutely do it. But also, it doesn't have to be complicated to take those first steps, as you mentioned, right? To start that process and to start to build those habits. It can be as simple as saying, okay, before I go to bed, I'm going to do my 6 cycles of box breathing and get you 3 good stretches in to make sure I'm shaking off my day. I'm stretching out my day. Any tension that I'm carrying from the day before I go to bed, I'm going to make sure I get that off of me so that I can sleep well and start my day refreshed. And then the next step is to like could be, okay, I did it before bed. Now I'm gonna do it before bed, and that's how I'm gonna start my day. It doesn't have to be like this whole big ordeal, because when it is, especially as a beginner, you're not gonna do it. you know? And even if you do, it's just like when, sometimes when you fall out of that gym habit, you're like, okay, I'm finna go to the gym. I'm gonna go every day. right?
Mhm.
You may do it for like a week or two, but if that's not accessible for you, if it doesn't make sense for you, it's not gonna be sustainable. And I would much rather you create a practice that is sustainable for you over a long period of time versus this grand gesture of going all in and then only being committed for the short term.
Mhm. Mhm. Very true. I think those are absolutely amazing. And I say that because they're easy. They're easy to do. You don't need anything extra. You have everything that you need. It's just you. It's just you really setting aside the time. I know when as well, and this is not specifically birth clients, these are clients that I'm working with who are healing womb trauma, or they're just dealing with grief or a
Mhm.
challenge. And so, one of the things that comes up a lot is mindfulness and implementing meditation, right, in some capacity.
Mhm.
And so, I think we get so hung up on trying to do it right and then also comparing ourselves to someone else's practice and their
Mhm.
journey. And so I said, if you can do 1 minute, girl, you have showed up. And that's a win,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
then also giving options and allowing people to see the flexibility in
Mhm.
mindfulness and meditation, which are two different things, right? But meditation does not have to be sitting down in a quiet space with a candle and the lights. And meditation could literally be a walking meditation.
Y
So you're clearing your mind and you're getting some steps in,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
It could be I'm going to wake up in the morning and I'm not at a point where I'm sitting down on a cushion, but I can take 1 minute to just, like you said, breathe
Mhm.
intentionally. That is your meditation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can increase your time, but I think it's giving ourselves grace and understanding that your best may not look the same every day. And
Yes.
that's okay,
Yes.
right? That is okay. And so I love the pause. You brought up breath work. I literally was like, I think I was holding my breath. And that's so funny because we do this work every day and we still have to remind
Yeah.
ourselves,
Yes.
hey, girl, are you breathing?
Right.
Right? Are you breathing? Because your mind is constantly moving and going with so
Mhm.
many things that you actually sit back and say, dang, I think, oh, let me drop my shot. Whew, okay. All right.
Mhm.
Let's regroup and start from there. So I love that. What are
Yes.
some of the positive shifts that you've seen with your clients by them using these three tools? And you can just choose one and give us a little, some feedback that your clients have said to you after implementing, let's say, the pause, because I really think that that one is so simple, but so powerful. I'm
Mhm.
so glad you said that first. Just take a pause, right?
Yes. Yes. So, one thing as you were talking, it jogged my memory of one thing I want to add to my response from the last question real quick. When you talked about us comparing ourselves to others, when I hear that from my clients, especially if they're beginning a new practice that they haven't done before, sometimes I'll suggest like, hey, maybe we need to accompany this with a social media fast, right?
Mm.
So that we are starting our practice on our terms, comfortably establishing our baseline without a source of comparison. And so, in doing that and moving to the question that you asked me just now, in doing that, my clients have noticed that they've begun to really shift. Pause allows them to disconnect from that automatic reaction that they would
Mhm.
typically do and now then move forward with intention and think about like, hey, okay, this is who I am. This is the energy that I want to embody in this present moment now.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
I don't want to carry this old energy of how I would typically respond in this situation And so that pause gives them an opportunity to say, okay, this is present me, and this is how present me responds in this situation. And so it's really been a boost of comfort. It's provided a lot of my clients with a boost of confidence because it's like I can show up in this way. Ooh, like, okay, like go me, like, seeing what we often talk about, like that higher version of ourselves. And like now moving from just visualizing or talking about who we want to be to now actually embodying that higher version of themselves, right? And that feels good to anybody, right? It feels different. And that feeling, they are then able to continue to carry through. Because one of the things about the pause, too, is a lot of times we want to see immediate changes or an immediate reward, right? For changes. And it may not be like $1 million or like a grand reward, but that pause, when used effectively, it provides an immediate reward because, and that reward is like, hey, like I've shown up in this way that I dreamed of for myself. And like now I'm actually embodying that. And so yeah, and so it just continues to grow and it continues to build their confidence. And then that in turn feeds into how they're able to communicate with people again. And like you said, and this of course extends to their life in general, not just, how they're talking to their providers or family around their birth plan and their birth experience. But just how they're showing up, period, in life. And so it's really useful, and and gotten lots of good feedback and success stories. And oftentimes with that same response, like, man, that just seems so simple. I never expected it to have such a profound impact.
I love that. What is one thing that you would like to leave our guests with as a takeaway? I mean, if they're paying attention, they're going to take away a lot of stuff. But what is one specific thing that you would like to leave them with today?
If I had to choose one specific thing, I would say, oh, there's so many things. Oh, let's see. If I have to pick one thing, I would say don't underestimate the role of mindset preparation um as you prepare to give birth. And also, you said one thing,
It's okay. You could
small thing.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Don't be afraid to have those hard conversations.
Mm,
Having people in your space during that time that are going to honor you, that are going to build your confidence as you step into honoring yourself in this new and special way is so important, and is that's not the time to compromise. There are times to compromise in life, and there are things to compromise about, but who you allow in your birthing space is not one of those things.
I think those are both beautiful. And I was thinking as you were talking, when you mentioned both of those things, it translates to even outside of the birth space, right? And to anyone and everyone in various circumstances and situations. And so I think those words of advice and those words of wisdom always hit really close to home when you can take them and they're not just specific to one area. You can apply them everywhere. So I think that's beautiful. So what's next for you, ma'am? What's on the horizon? What does 2026 hold for you? How are you ending out 2025? What can we look forward to?
So I am going to be hosting some master classes around a lot of the topics that I discussed today. In 2026, I really want to grow my practice to incorporate partners and other members of the birth support team more into the work that I do. And I in talks and looking to participate in training to share these tools with other birth workers so that they can then start incorporating some of these things into their work with their clients. And then also maybe joining a collective with some other
Awesome.
birth workers so that we can kind of provide that wraparound turnkey experience for families all in one place.
I love that.
And also, I am in the process of I'm studying traditional midwifery. So I'm super duper excited about that.
Congratulations! I'm so excited for you. Yes, you are going to have to keep me updated on this journey. I get goosebumps every time I hear a sister say that she is going down the midwifery path. I get so excited. I'm so excited for you. Congratulations. How can people
Thank you.
find you? What is your contact information? I will make sure that I put it in the description below of this episode.
So you can find me on TikTok at Prenatal Mindset Coach. My Instagram handle is Mama Mind Frame. And I'm also on Facebook as Mama Mind Frame. Or I even oftentimes have people to follow my personal page where I share a lot of birthday things on there too at the Engineering Herbalist on Instagram.
I love it. I was about to bring up your herbalism. I was like, I don't want to do too much. I don't want to do too much. But I knew you were still working in the garden, girl. I knew you were still growing some things. Beautiful. And before we close out, there's always one question that I love to ask our guests before we shut it down for the day. And that question is, with all of your lived experiences, everything that you've seen, you've been through, what would you tell little Antoinette?
You know what? Really tell little Antoinette, really all the things that I tell my clients now. um, little Antoinette was very much a people pleaser and did not have self-advocacy tools. So I would tell little Antoinette that it is okay to speak up for yourself, even if it means that somebody ends up being disappointed or upset, that it is okay to oh, I feel the tears coming. It's okay to live your life like for you, that you don't owe it to anybody else. And that if they don't like it, that's okay. Like it's okay for people to be upset or to feel some type of way when you choose yourself. And it's okay to choose yourself. Like that's not selfish. It's not self-centered. It's okay to choose yourself and you don't have to hold guilt around doing that.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you for
Thank
joining me
you.
today. Thank you for sharing space. I honor and appreciate you. You are doing amazing work. And I look
Thank you.
forward to continuing to cheer you on and to support you on this journey and to get all the scoops on your midwifery path. Please keep doing everything you're doing. It is definitely needed. We definitely need you. And I just say thank you. So thank you everybody for joining us today. Please return, come back in the next episode. We'll have even more amazingness coming your way. But again, thank you so much for joining and we will see you in the next one. Peace.